guardianship, business planning, and wealth preservation. They believe that planning for the future should not be left until the future. Whether you are young, middle-aged, or in retirement, your life is always changing. Comprehensive estate planning can protect you and your loved ones from the unexpected. When you experience a significant life cycle event or life change, it is a good time to have your estate planning reviewed. Contact their office today at 954-839-8705.
Hey, we're back. You've got the Ask the Experts radio show. We're with you every Thursday now from 5 to 6. We used to be on Mondays. And this part of the country, it's a little bit more of a mature audience. Okay, it's an older audience like me. And estate planning is so important. So we wanted to make sure we had one of the best law firms that does estate planning and elder law. So we're going to talk about estate planning today. We have one of the he can say this because you're certified, aren't you?
I'm board certified by the Florida Bar in estate planning.
Yeah, you are actually an expert in estate planning, and we could say it legally.
That's right. Only people who are board certified by the Florida Bar are allowed to say they're experts or specialists.
Exactly. So let me introduce you to David Shulman. His law firm is Ginsberg, Shulman. You're in Fort Lauderdale?
We're in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and we also have a satellite.
You're in Las Olas, right?
We're on Las Olas. We also have a satellite office where we see people on Glades Road in Boca Raton also.
Very good, because we've got a huge audience here in Palm Beach. First of all, let's start off. I'm glad you're here, because we did a tape show last time, and we actually got phone calls. People didn't know the show was being taped. We're going to talk about revocable living trust today. But I first want to start off with, tell everybody about your law firm. How did you get started?
Well, when I graduated law school, I went to George Washington University Law School.
Great school.
In Washington, D.C., and I'm at heart, I'm a tax guy.
Okay.
And there's a lot of tax and estate planning. So when I graduated law school, I worked for everyone's favorite government agency in Washington, D.C., the IRS.
Here we just talked about tax relief.
You just said the tax relief. I was an IRS attorney, but I didn't do audits or anything like that. It was more writing regulations. And I worked for the IRS about 7 years, and I got tired of the cold and the snow. And I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I grew up in Plantation.
And you lived in D.C.? What a difference.
I went to college in Boston. It was even colder,
that's just as bad
more
too.
snow. So after a while, I said, okay, it's time for me to come home. I was ready to come back home to South Florida, to the sun. And I took a year off. I got a master's in estate planning and LLM at the University of Miami.
So you know what the heck you're doing.
I tried.
Bottom line. And you've seen both sides of it, too.
Right.
By working with the IRS.
Sure. Then I did estate planning. I was at a big firm for a few years, and then I decided to go out on my own. I had my own solo practice for a few years, and then me and my law partner, Jill Ginsberg, we merged our practices together.
Now, you got to promise me something. You're going to bring Jill with you next time.
I'm going to try.
We're going to put her under the heat, too, not just you.
She's board certified in elder law, so maybe next time we'll have an elder law show.
Explain to everybody, what is estate planning?
Estate planning basically is, if you ever thought about what's going to happen to all my stuff when I die, that's what estate planning is. Part of it. The other part is planning for your incapacity.
Okay.
That what's going to happen, who's going to take care of you and your belongings when you are incapacitated, and who's going to do it after you die, after you pass away. And you want to do it in such a way that it protects both yourself and your heirs from potential creditors, and to pay the least amount of taxes and fees as possible.
Listen, you might be 42 years old and think, well, you know what?
I am 42 years old.
Are you really? Okay, so that was a good guess. But just because you're not 70, 75, you need to start planning now, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Absolutely. I have 3 grandparents who lived into their 90s, and my mother died in her early 40s from cancer.
Wow. So we don't know.
You don't know. And every time you get on those I drove from my office to here on I-95. And
that'll do it.
Every time you get on the roads here, sometimes you take your life in your hands.
Exactly. And you've got to start planning now. Not because, I'm going to tell you something. I know people who are young, they go, I don't need health insurance. I'm young and healthy. Until they have a catastrophic problem.
Yeah. What's saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail?
Exactly. So there's so many things to plan for. I mean, let's start first of all, because I asked you when we first started. I keep hearing revocable living trust. Explain what that is to everybody.
The purpose of a revocable living trust is twofold. It's to avoid probate and to avoid a guardianship. You can become incapacitated.
Because probate can become very expensive.
Probate can be very expensive and time-consuming, and it takes a long time. A revocable living trust is a will substitute. Then instead of your will saying where all your property goes, the trust says where all your property goes when you pass away. And in addition to having a durable power of attorney, if you're incapacitated, the successor trustee, can make financial decisions for you.
So then you've got a will, you've got a trust, you've got a living will. Can you explain each one of those to everybody?
The first document, the basic document is your will. A last will and testament or will, it's all the same thing.
Everybody should have a will.
Everyone absolutely should have a will. And the will says is when I die, this is where I want my property to go to. My spouse, my children.
And if you don't have a will, then what happens?
If you don't have a will, then the government chooses for you where your property goes.
You're kidding me.
It's called intestacy.
Okay.
Through the laws of intestacy, the government their law says where your property goes. So, did you ever watch the Brady Bunch?
I did.
Remember, there was Mike and Carol. And
yes, the mom and dad.
They each had their 3 children of their own before getting married, and assume they didn't adopt each other's kids. I don't think they adopted each other's kids in the show. Let's say Mike died first. Mike Brady died.
Right.
Well, let's say, and they lived in Florida. Under Florida law, half of his property would go to Carol, and the other half would go to the 3 boys.
Okay.
And then when she died, all of the property, or her property, would go to the girls. And the boys would get nothing. Okay. So if that's not what they wanted, the boys, it wouldn't be an even distribution between the kids.
But if there's no will, the government can come in and take as much as they want?
Well, the government doesn't take it. The government tells you how it goes. The government says that depending on whether you're married or if you have children, or if you have children from a previous marriage or a previous relationship, or your spouse's children, what the division is between the spouse and the children. And if you don't have a spouse or children, then it goes through other levels. It'll go to your parents or your siblings or a distant cousin if you don't have close heirs, and you want it to go to a friend or a charity. You can go to some distant cousin who you didn't know, who's going to be. It's called the laughing heir, because they're not sad that you died and they get all this money.
Do you see a lot of fighting?
Unfortunately, yes.
Wow, that's especially someone who has a lot of assets.
Unfortunately, both when people become older and they are incapacitated and no longer can take care of themselves, children will often fight over their parents' money, and then when they pass away, often they'll fight over it. It's not nice, but it happens, unfortunately.
Who represents when the family comes in and they said, my father is losing it, his memory, but he really has all of his faculties.
Does he or doesn't he?
Yes. I mean, who represents? Do you actually go to court with the person they're saying, my father he should not be making decisions on his own anymore? Do you represent that person?
Well, actually, my partner represents that person. I do some of it, but she's the expert.
What is that called?
It's called a guardianship.
Okay.
And my partner is a board certified in elder law. Jill Ginsberg. She's a great guardianship attorney.
And guardianship is not just for the elderly. You might have a child like Renee does who's autistic, that the state comes in and they actually take over her daughter unless she gets the right papers, the right documents.
Sometimes that happens. You can do what's known as a guardianship advocacy for an autistic person. But sometimes, in middle-aged people something happens to them where they need to have a guardian appointed. But it's proper estate planning. Guardianships are bad because they're very expensive and they're very intrusive.
And they have to be done, though.
Well,
I mean, they have to, because
they don't have to be done if you have proper estate planning.
Okay.
The only time guardianships happen is if you don't have proper estate planning. Because a guardianship, a court takes your rights away and gives someone else the rights to make decisions for you.
And see, Renee didn't know that. She didn't know that estate planning would have covered all that.
If you have capacity.
Yes.
But proper estate planning avoids guardianships because you have a good durable power of attorney and a designation of healthcare surrogate and a properly funded revocable trust. All of those can hopefully avoid guardianship proceedings.
What age group do you tell people they should at least get a will?
as young as possible. If you're 18, you at least need basic planning. Even 18-year-olds have assets, and they need a healthcare surrogate and a durable power of attorney to appoint someone to make decisions for them in case they're incapacitated. If you have something and you care about it, and you have people, if you have stuff you care about and people you care about, then you need to have some sort of planning.
Okay. Now, we brought up trust. Tell everybody what a trust is.
A trust is a legal term. It's a legal concept where it's a relationship where you're appointing a trustee to take care of the assets in favor of a beneficiary.
Trustee is usually an attorney?
A trustee does not happen to be an attorney. Okay. It's often a family member or a friend, and they're also a professional trust.
How should they decide? If they're going to have a trustee, how should a family decide who should be the trustee?
It's really difficult, and it's one of the hardest things that people make decisions on who their trustee and other fiduciaries are going to be, because they're not going to be around anymore. They're either going to be dead or they're going to be incapacitated. So they need to find someone who they trust to make.
Number one, trust.
Trust. And depending on the level of assets, it's either a close family member or for a higher level of assets, there are professional trust companies. If people have several $1 million, then their banks and trust companies can do that. But generally, it's a family member or a trusted family friend or a trusted professional who they know.
Okay. Give everybody your phone number.
My phone number is 954-990-0896.
Now, you have a website, too, because I've seen your website. You got a great website.
Thank you.
Give them your website address.
It's GinsbergShulman.com. That's GinsbergShulman.com. No C in Shulman.
It's really important. We started Ask the Experts 2 years ago, and the name of the show is Ask the Experts. So it's really important that Renee and I have people who are at the top. And top doesn't mean top. Dollar-wise, that you charge the most. Because we talked about this. There's a lot of work involved.
Sure.
A lot of work involved. A lot of knowledge. But you are certified, though. You can actually call yourself an expert.
That's right.
The bar says you can call yourself an expert. And that's the kind of people, that's the kind of firms, because we have a lot of different firms. They do estate planning. You've got offices here in Palm Beach. You have an office in Fort Lauderdale, Las Olas. Do people need to come in for their first visit?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
I like to sit across from someone and look them in the eye and talk to them. It's really a way to get to know the clients. I've had, on rare occasions, initial consultations over the phone where there's extenuating circumstances, but it's not something I generally like to do. I'd say 99% of
because you deal in elder law, and sometimes the elder can't leave the house. So do you go to them?
If necessary. Again, mostly consultations and our meetings happen in our office, but I've gone to hospitals, I've gone to nursing homes to meet with clients.
Now, why would you not want to leave property to children?
That's a key part of estate planning, is protecting your children and your heirs from creditors and from themselves.
What age group do we call children nowadays?
I'm talking both minor children and adult children.
Okay.
And it's really leaving property to anyone. You don't want to necessarily leave it outright. Because what happens is we're in a very litigious society. South Florida is there are a lot of lawyers here like to sue people. That if you leave property to someone outright, then it's subject to the claims of their creditors. Meaning that it's divorce and to personal injury, to contract dispute. If you're driving down the street and you get in an accident and someone sues you, that money that you inherited can all be taken away. But with proper planning, if you leave that in trust, then that money can be protected from your heirs, potential children, potential future creditors.
And the part we just never know.
I like to say protected from future ex-wives.
Okay. Yes. We're going to go to break. The name of the law firm is Ginsberg Shulman. They're in Fort Lauderdale. They also have an office in
Boca Raton.
So, and like I said, if you're elderly and you can't get out of the house, you can make some kind of arrangements with them.
Absolutely.
And your website is, because I love your website.
It's GinsbergShulman.com, www.ginsbergshulman.com.
We're going to be right back. When we come back, we're going to talk about elder law, so everybody understands what elder law actually is. We'll be right back with David Shulman.
When was the last time your will was reviewed, or do you even have one? Do you know that without a will, the government decides how your property is distributed upon your death? Did you know that without proper estate planning, your children would receive every penny of their inheritance on their 18th birthday to use or lose without any guidance? The law offices of Ginsberg Shulman provide their clients with comprehensive estate planning, probate and trust administration, guardianship, business planning, and wealth preservation. They believe that planning for the future should not be left until the future. Whether you are young, middle-aged, or in retirement, your life is always changing. Comprehensive estate planning can protect you and your loved ones from the unexpected. When you experience a significant life cycle event or life change, it is a good time to have your estate planning reviewed. Contact their office today at 954-839-8705.
And we're back. This is the Ask the Expert show. We're on every Thursday from 5 to 6, and we're doing our estate planning show today. We have David Shulman. He is a senior partner with Ginsberg and Shulman. They're located on Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale, and they're also in Boca Raton.
On Glades Road.
On Glades Road, okay. So you're close by here. Explain to everybody what elderly law is, because we hear that elderly law. What does that mean?
Elder law is a subset of estate planning.
Okay.
That the elder, we all need estate planning, but the elder have special needs also. And
some of those needs are?
Well, most of them have to do with health care.
Okay.
Planning for long-term care, to make sure that you're eligible for government benefits and Social Security and Medicaid and that type of making sure that
like home care is covered,
home care or nursing home, to make sure that you're eligible. We work our whole life paying taxes. We pay income taxes for 40, 50 years. Then when we're elderly, we're entitled to the benefits that we've spent our whole life paying taxes for. And so there's certain government benefits that people need to qualify for towards the end of their life to take care of them. And that usually has to do with Medicaid. However, and it's too much for this show. We can do a whole nother show on it, that if you have too much assets or too much income, you may be disqualified for Medicaid.
Is that right?
And you're not able to receive benefits. So there's planning you can do to make sure that you're qualified. But let's talk about that in another show.
We could do a whole show of that.
That's absolutely a whole other show.
And David's with us every month, so that'll come back. Now, what is estate tax?
The estate tax is a tax. It's sometimes called a death tax or an inheritance tax, but it's really an estate tax, which means it's a tax, and when you pass away, all your property that you own over a certain level is subject to tax. Now, right now, that's called the estate tax exemption. Right now, that amount is $5.4 million. And so
I don't have to worry about that.
Right. So there are very few people that are worried about the estate tax. So if you have $5.4 million and if you're listening out there and you have that much money, give me a call. I'm happy to help you out. It used to be a lot lower. Back in the 90s, it was about $600,000. And that includes your house, your retirement accounts, your life insurance. So there are a lot of people who are subject to the estate tax. Now it's less than 1%. However, if Bernie Sanders wins, it's going to go one way. If Donald Trump wins, it's going the other way. We don't know the only thing that's
pretty unstable right now, because we don't really know what's going to happen.
Well, Congress always changes the laws. What is it? The only constant is change? Is that what they say?
Yes.
So right now, the estate tax is $5.4 million. So most people don't have to worry about the estate tax. However, there's still income tax that you just had the previous caller the previous show was an income tax show.
Right.
So everyone has to worry about income tax. And there's a lot of planning in estate planning that when you die, you want to make it so your heirs have to pay as little capital gains as possible.
Some of these questions I'm asking you are, some people probably say, oh, that's pretty elementary, but there's a lot of people who are uneducated when it comes to estate planning, when it comes to even the revocable living trust. There aren't as many people as you would think that are educated on this.
Well, it's because people don't like to face death. It's a very unpleasant thing to think about, that we're going to get old, or we're going to get sick.
They keep putting it off.
And we're going to die. Procrastination is the biggest thing that I see. It's what prevents people from coming in. It's not the cost. It's procrastination. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to face the fact that they're going to pass away. But if you have kids, you have minor children, you have property, then if you don't plan, it's going to be a huge mess. It's a lot.
You probably have a lot of stories, don't you? Being an estate planning attorney, people who didn't plan. Now, just give me a couple examples. We're not going to use names or anything, but people that you saw that didn't plan. Because if we can scare someone into getting serious about their estate planning, then this show was good.
Well, without going into numbers on fees,
okay, it doesn't matter either.
It could probably cost 10 times as much after death if you don't plan than you would have paid if you did plan. Just because we don't know where any of the property is, we have to pay people to do an air search, we have to find it, and not only that, your heirs, your children are often will fight over property.
Do you see that a lot?
Unfortunately, yes.
You do.
And it's often, sometimes it's over money, and sometimes it's over things that have no real financial value, but have a lot of sentimental value.
So you're shaking your head. I cannot believe they're fighting over this.
I mean, I've had a case where there was hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, which they were able to negotiate pretty quickly. And there was one ring that had no financial value, but it was grandmother's ring from Europe that had a lot of sentimental value, or the whole thing almost fell apart over.
You're kidding. What about animals? Do you see animals come? This is, that dog should come to me, or that cat.
Well, people don't fight over. I haven't seen that many fights over animals, but people can certainly do estate planning, the plan to take care of their animals. They can do what's known as a pet trust.
What's it called?
A pet trust.
There is a pet trust?
There's a pet trust in which they appoint a friend or family member to take care of their pet, and they leave money. Some pets can be expensive.
Right.
So they leave money in trust for people to take care of their pet, for food and vet bills and all this sort of cost of taking care of a pet. And that's what's known as a pet trust is. It's not like Leona Helmsley, who left $20 million to the dog itself.
I was just going to say, in Beverly Hills, I've read where people left all this money to their dog.
That I don't see as much of.
Now, are there special rules in Florida regarding your homestead?
There are. Florida homestead is very complicated. There are 3 different types of rules regarding homestead. People think homestead, and most people think taxes. That when you own a home in Florida, that your taxes on your home are a lot less than property that's not your homestead.
Because we have a lot of these snowbirds that come down here. So what constitutes your homestead?
Your homestead is your house, where your domicile, where you plan to stay.
Okay.
It's residence with intent to remain.
Is there a certain amount of months or anything? Because some people come down here for the half the year and then they're back home again for the other half.
It's not technically you want to be here more than 6 months of the year,
okay,
but it's more of a facts and circumstances test. It's where is your mail? Where are you registered to vote? Where are your cars registered? If you have kids, where do the kids go to school? It's really looking at the whole picture to see looking at all the facts and circumstances, where do you reside? Do you reside here or do you reside in New York? Now, New York has state income tax, which is very high.
Plus, they have very high, they have very
high state income tax. So we have clients who are New Yorkers who were New Yorkers who moved to Florida, but New York wants to try to pull them back. So we have to explain to the clients, you have to stay in Florida for more than 6 months because you can't be in New York for over 6 months because New York is going to tax you.
Okay.
Also,
so they should be down here at least 7 or 8 months?
No, the more the better.
Okay.
But also make sure that their life revolves around them living in Florida. And then,
how do they prove that?
It's one thing at a time. It's where's your driver's license? Where's your car? Where does your mail go? Where are you registered to vote? Looking at the entire picture, where's your home?
So, they need, because we do have a lot of snowbirds down here, and I know the taxes are high in New York.
Right.
So I would think I would want to make my homestead here in Florida.
Right. And now, going back to other talk about homestead, as far as estate planning goes, that when you own a home, that the law says there are only certain people you can leave your home to if you're married or if you have minor children. If you're married, you can only leave your home to your wife,
okay,
to your spouse. So if one person owns the house, they can only leave it to their spouse. And they can't leave it to anyone else unless there's
They can tell you who you have to leave your house to?
That's the law.
Okay.
And if you have minor children, it's even more complicated.
Wow.
You can't leave it to anyone. You can only leave it to the spouse gets a certain part of it and the minor children get a certain part of it.
Well, listen, I love talking with you because I know there's so many people out there. We have a lot of elderly down here.
Sure.
That maybe haven't started planning yet, and they have to. They probably have waited way too long.
Absolutely. I mean, if the older you are, obviously the closer it is to the time where you need to plan. Everyone needs to plan now.
And I think that trust, like you, is very important. So don't Google somebody. We have the best here. The name of the law firm is Ginsberg, Shulman. You've got 2 locations. You're on Las Olas and you're on Glades in Boca Raton right here.
Right.
Give everybody your phone number.
It's 954-990-0896.
Now, someone I know is looking for a pencil right now or a pen. So they give it to them one more time.
954-990-0896.
And your website
is ginsbergshulman.com. It's GINSBERGSHULMAN.
And you specialize in elder law and estate planning.
I specialize in wills, trusts, and estates. I'm board certified, and my partner, Jill Ginsberg, is board certified in elder law.
Who's got better prices, you or her?
We need to find it.
Anyway, listen, it's so good having you on.
Oh, thank
back
you very
in
much.
studio. We'll be back again next month with more estate planning on Ask the Experts. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Peace and love. See you next week.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Experts show with Steve-O and Renee. Tune in every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. while some of the top local experts in their field from Broward and Palm Beach counties educate you in the areas of law, health, financial, and home improvement. You can also call our offices at 888-574-6999 to become an expert on our show. The opinions